So good morning, good afternoon. For some of the participants, it might be even good evening. Live from Amsterdam, also from Montreal, and I think from Kiev, I'm not sure. Welcome to this panel with the title, How Keystone Teams Have Accelerated Ecosystems by Supporting Everyone. So we will have a conversation about Keystone Teams, how they can unite the stakeholders, how they can influence, how they can help improve an ecosystem. And we have in our panel, Nataly Veremeeva and Patrick Gagne, and we are expecting Miska Hakala from Helsinki. He should be here any minute. But before I want to ask Patrick and Natalia to introduce themselves, it's quite cool. It's fresh from the news that Amsterdam, the ecosystem, was ranked number 12 on the ecosystem ranking. Miska is also joining us.
Hello. So sorry, I'm a bit late.
No worries, no worries. We're just, let's say, I was making the introductions and I was just proudly sharing amongst all people, active in this panel, that Amsterdam is ranked number 12. And, I just sent a tweet and I said, well, this is not Amsterdam only, it's the entire Dutch ecosystem. And I truly believe in that, because it's not only that, Amsterdam is small, as a city, as a hub. So also having other cities being involved in the ranking, that will, bring you up in the ranking. But I think it's a strong point. Amsterdam is connected nationally, but also I think internationally. So I'm proud, and I was just checking in and I saw that Montreal, Patrick Gagne, you're CEO of Osmo, and I saw that Montreal is ranked number 36. With some words to it, it's gaining momentum. So my question to you is, shortly introduce yourself and Osmo, but also what makes your ecosystem strong, and what should people know about Montreal and the ecosystem?
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Ruben, and hi to Miska and Nataly. So Montreal is, I'm first and foremost, I'm Patrick Gagne, so I'm CEO of the Osmo Foundation, which is one of the main tech hubs in Montreal, and also co-founded Bonjour Startup, which is the equivalent of Startup Amsterdam. So it's the ecosystem promoter, if you want, key actor in the local ecosystem, which is comprised of the Keystone team we're going to be talking about this morning. So Montreal is gaining momentum because we have been active over the last 3 years with Startup Genome, and also realizing what KPIs we need to work on, specifically on local connectedness and international connectedness as well. So these are the key KPIs we're working on to improve the city's momentum and rise progressively as each year goes by. So really, we're focusing on our KPIs. Attracting talent, promoting the city, promoting the startup ecosystem in Montreal, and connecting with other startup ecosystems across the world. I think that's one key we're going to be talking about as well, that we need to intensify over the next year.
So Patrick, you mentioned it's Bonjour Startup. So an unfair advantage of Montreal is that you have multi-language, like also speaking French. And then you have tight connections with, French-oriented countries, such as obviously France itself and Paris, but also the northern of Africa. Or how is that working out?
Well, we do work with the francophone community across the world, but I have to say our main economic ties are with the U.S. obviously, and Europe. So those are our main markets where we connect with. Montreal also has the ability to be a platform for exporting across North America, much like Amsterdam would be for Europe, right? So because we have economic ties with all of the G7 countries, which enables any startup founder to export in those countries very easily. So that's one strength
so
that we have
let's see
in
how
Montreal.
connections are with our panelists and the countries and cities. So we have Nataly Veremeeva leading Tech Ukraine. So Natalia, I did not see Ukraine yet, or Kiev, or Odessa, or Kharkiv, or other cities being ranked on the Startup Genome list, at least not within the first 40. Obviously, we have all love-hate relation, with these rankings. So we really hate them, but also we love them and they inspire us. But tell me about Tech Ukraine. What is it, and what makes the ecosystem of Ukraine strong? And what should people know?
Okay, thank you for the introduction, Ruben. Yes, I also was a little bit sad not to see Ukraine in the rankings of the Startup Genome this year. I hope that next year we will definitely make it there, because in some ecosystem reports, for example, in Startup Blink, we're already ranked in the top 30. So we are on the place 29, and Kiev is also rising. It's risen 4 positions since last year, and right now it's 32 positions from last year, and now it's 32. So it is considered to be a European hub already, which is something that we celebrate. Unfortunately, it's not in the Startup Genome, but I also explain it by the lack of the information about Ukrainian ecosystem. It's just not that visible. And sometimes our companies are registered elsewhere, and they're difficult to count, and really we're not so transparent yet as we would love to be. And maybe also when comprising the reports, the data is needed. So we at Tech Ukraine will be ready to provide more details for the next year reports to really place Ukraine on the list, because we believe that a lot of things are really happening. Yeah.
So Natalia, what should people know? One or two things, in a keyword or in a key sentence.
Well, I think the key phrase is that Kiev and Ukraine as such is really booming right now. A lot of things are happening. IT industry is one of our top 3 exporting industries. Traditionally, we started from outsourcing, but right now the startup scene is also picking up really intensively, and the position of Kiev as one of the European hubs proves this.
And I can share those, let's say, thoughts. I've been to Kiev many times, traveling around the world, also Helsinki. But I think people should know Grammarly is from Ukraine. MacPow is from Ukraine. So big tech giants are in the making. I think it's 50,000 techies, programmers. There's a lot of talent over there. So interesting how also the ecosystem is growing. So let's go to Miska, because I've been to Helsinki many times during the last 6 years in my former role as CEO of Startup Amsterdam, together with my colleague public lead Bas Beekman. And for me, Helsinki and Amsterdam, it's a bit of similar. So seeing Amsterdam and the Netherlands in the top, let's say 12, I was looking just around the corner, where is Helsinki? Because I was expecting you also in the top 15 at least. Miska, please also introduce yourself, and I'm curious how you see those rankings, and also what is making the Helsinki ecosystem strong, and what should people know?
Okay, so I'm Miska Hakala from Helsinki Business Hub, which is the local investing and development company for this region, and I would have to take this ranking first. So of course we would love to see Helsinki as number 1, but we do know that of course we are a bit smaller than some of the larger economies, and sometimes it's actually really hard for us to reach out, depending on the cases. So you might have a couple of really good exits in 1 year, and that could actually really raise the bar on how you actually see yourself in these rankings. So the rankings in large scale, I think that they are really interesting, and then of course once we are somewhere in the range of top 15, 10, of course we will utilize those for marketing purposes and so on. But it's more or less it just tells you a snapshot of where the certain area is at certain point of time. About the ecosystems and the opportunities in Helsinki, I would really it's most likely you have been to Helsinki because of the Slush, which is a really great tech conference.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's one of the prime motivators for several startups to actually establish their office here in Helsinki, because the atmosphere and the whole network of people working, and there's plenty of kind of like entrepreneurs, youngsters coming from students and so on, and people all over the world just because of this atmosphere and having this network is really coming to this place to actually work on their stuff. And I think that's exactly what you said about kind of like a resemblance of Amsterdam, because it's a rather small, compact place where people actually know each other, and it's really easy to navigate. And these are the kind of like factors which help for anybody to actually find the opportunities in Helsinki. Another one I would like to raise as a really key point is the city of Helsinki is really keen on making the Helsinki as the most functional city in the world, and that also means that they do provide plenty of piloting opportunities. And there's a kind of like, if you want to develop your smart city solutions, you have best opportunities over here, or smart mobility is another area where we have been working quite a lot during the past 5 years or so.
Great. So it's some sort of a launching pad for startups or for products, to find lead users. Obviously, like Helsinki and Slush is being known, how is Slush making connections internationally as an let's say event, or as maybe even a platform?
I think Slush is really a platform because it started with the local small startup event here in Helsinki for 10 plus years ago, and now it's become much more bigger event. But what Slush has been doing as an organization, they have grown and they have really reached out for different kind of like having their own events in Singapore, Tokyo, all over the world, and utilizing that the kind of brand and making this kind of like part of the community. And that's exactly what this year the Slush will be held in digital format. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they will actually turn this into something really interesting, because they have their own way of doing things, and it's always really makes you interesting.
So question here, Miska, sorry for interrupting, but a question here is like, Slush is this platform. It's like, it's known. Everyone is traveling to Slush. I know it's a bit of a limited space, so you have I think 18,000 people or so. What would you advise to Keystone teams around the globe to connect or to relate with Slush in order to be effective in this platform?
Yeah, I think that one of the key points is actually because the Slush as such is so big. So you need to be able to navigate through the side events and find the right people, and really kind of like, because during the Slush weeks, there's so much happening in Helsinki. So you can always reach out for me or somebody else from our team, and we can kind of like guide you on finding the right places, because it's not just the full program, because there's so much happening on top of that.
Okay, so I think this is not the question is about Slush, but this is a question to all kinds of let's say events. I know in Montreal you have the World Summit AI, but then the version in America you have like the next web conference. You have all these bigger events that relate in whatever way to Keystone teams. So let me go to Patrick. We are discussing Keystone teams. What is your definition of a Keystone team? How do you see it, and what roles should Keystone teams play?
Yeah, sure. For me, the Keystone team is bringing together, and that's what we've done at Bonjour Startup in Montreal, is to bring together key individuals from the public sector, from startup support organizations, investors, entrepreneurs, and key corporates. For me, those are the key individuals that around the foundation of Bonjour Startup Montreal to make it a success, and being able to mobilize the local community around these key individuals. That's what the Keystone team is for us.
And then this is like clear. And then when it comes to the roles of such a team, I see those players, stepping in, influencers, stakeholders in a team. But then from out of the team, you have also some sort of an operational role, or tactical, strategic roles. Can you explain us a bit? What such a team is then doing?
Yeah. So we're first and foremost, we're bringing the local community together. That's bringing the startup support organizations working together. So really working on local connectedness is one of the key roles of
how do you do that? So give me an example how that works in practice.
Well, we for example, recently during the COVID crisis, we created task forces with as many as 30 organizations together to focus on entrepreneurs' needs. So we created like 5 tracks of task forces based on segments of startups, how they reacted to the COVID crisis. You know, the ones that were hibernating, the ones that were actually growing, the ones that were pivoting, and we created task forces that promoted but also developed to help entrepreneurs in those key segments. So that we brought a lot of people together, and that's I think a key role that we're creating right now. But also promoting internationally the ecosystem. That's another role that we've given ourselves, is to put Montreal on the map. Yeah. Right. As much as Helsinki is doing that, and Kiev is doing that as well. We love to promote Montreal and promoting its key advantages like talent. Local talent is strong in Montreal. We have the strongest per capita number of students in North America today. So the talent pool is just incredible. So that's another role that we've focused on, is promoting Montreal. Yeah. And the other is creating ties with other ecosystems. So working on international connectedness, like what we're doing today. Our work together last year, Ruben, and really creating ties with key startup ecosystems so that our founders are more connected with the international community. So that's another role that we've given ourselves. So those are the three main areas. We have others, but working on local community, promoting internationally, and creating ties with other ecosystems.
Yeah, and I see that. When I was reading about Amsterdam as being ranked 12, I read connectedness. This is like a key part. Connecting dots, being an independent broker. This is some sort of how we build up Startup Amsterdam when I was leading Startup Amsterdam, and we always said we are a public-private group of people, public-private initiative. This is a bit what you're saying. Now I run TechConnect, which is not so much on strengthening the ecosystem itself, but bringing equality and bringing diversity into the ecosystem, also by educating IT talent from underrepresented groups. And there we have more a private-public, let's say, approach. So instead of public-private, it's swapped a bit. But I really see that being an independent broker, let's say, role. I want to, Patrick, I want to swap and go to Natalia, because it's also like each and every setting, country, culture, region has different, let's say, aspects, strong points, backgrounds. So Natalia, can you explain, so when it comes to a Keystone team, how would you, let's say, what would your definition be, or your explanation about it, and what roles is Tech Ukraine picking up as a Keystone team, as we call it that way?
Well, in my understanding, like my definition of a Keystone team is a group of visionaries that has a bird view and a strategic understanding of what needs to be done inside the ecosystem. So to understand all the gaps that are there, and to launch initiatives to tackle the problems that are the most burning ones, which is the next step for the ecosystem to develop. And they are at the same time neutral, and they're not lobbying interests of anybody, but like balancing, and really I like this role of neutral broker really much, because I believe that every ecosystem needs such a connector which is not biased and gives or is trusted by everybody. So this is exactly like the role that we want to grow into. So we are comparatively young. We are 1 year old, but we're developing actively. And also speaking about the role, I think that for now, what we do like the most successfully is to communicate the role. We believe that Ukrainian IT ecosystem and tech ecosystem is hugely under-communicated. We're not busy with that. Just the world knows nothing about us and what's happening. And we want to change that. So we want to establish these connections. We want to give information to those that are interested. We want to gather data and give this reliable data to the stakeholders that they can use, it. And we hope that that will also help to get trust from international investors, from international companies, that they will come and see with their own eyes that Ukraine has a lot of potential, and we can do something together.
So that's one thing I hear a lot. And, you know, when we started Startup Amsterdam, we were a bit, let's say, modest. I always come with this story of the happiness professor. You know, Miska, it might be a new story for you, but I'm sure that Patrick and Nataly have heard from it before. The happiness professor, we have such a person in the Netherlands, is explaining why the Netherlands is doing so great, because we are constantly complaining. And after we complain, we improve. That's a bit of the Dutch, let's say, approach. And obviously, what we learned is that this is not working when you are exposing or presenting your ecosystem, because we saw all these influencers and stakeholders, presenting the Amsterdam ecosystem, but also complaining about it. And then we saw these articles on TechCrunch, Business Insider, The Next Web, with this is doing, we are doing pretty well in Amsterdam, but, and then we had all the, the buts. And then one of the things we did, Bas and myself, who was leading Startup Amsterdam, we said, okay, let's bring a optimistic, positive narrative. Let's tell the stories, create pride in the ecosystem. So this is, an important role. Natalia is, you will recognize, Patrick as well. Just be proud, tell the stories, know the examples. I have a question for Miska and Patrick. It's brought in via the chat. And the question here is a Keystone team only for local projects or also across borders? In other words, how could Helsinki Keystone team work together, for instance, with the Montreal Keystone team? So Miska, is it local or is it across borders?
It's very international. It has to be, and it's the only way it can really work. So we have been working quite a lot with different ecosystems. Lately, I've been personally working quite a lot with Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, which are actually making really good progress in the rankings as well, as you can see.
And what examples? So how specifically, how concrete are you working together?
Really good example is we have actually put up a piloting program together with Israel Innovation Authority, where we have been helping the Israeli companies to pilot their solutions in Helsinki and Finnish-based companies to actually pilot their solutions in Israel. So kind of like trying to make this matchmaking between these two different ecosystems and facilitate this type of like a learning and once people actually start working with each other, they actually start kind of like making new partnerships and making new investments, making totally new teams, which might have some of the kind of activity in Helsinki, some of the activity in Tel Aviv, and they are working together with a kind of like idea of really creating something new and finding new markets, because both countries are actually rather small. So it's more or less like engineering force, and then you have to find the markets outside these two countries. So it's a really good example, and something similar we can always kind of like try to facilitate with different ecosystems, because it's more you have people being exposed to different places, different ideas, different kind of like companies working in a similar area. I think it's really worthwhile for them, and this type of like some teams like us is really needed to facilitate that, because these companies sometimes they don't realize that they should actually really go to Kiev or some other place to really kind of reach out.
So thanks, Miska. So my question to you, Patrick, is a bit the same, but it might be even more specific. Like tomorrow morning, now it's 8 o'clock your time, but let's say tomorrow morning you wake up, you're fresh, sharp, and then you send an email to Miska. What is the project you want to start together with Helsinki, together with the Keystone team that Miska is leading?
Well, one of the things I'd love to do, and we started doing that in fall with Stockholm, is to welcome startups from Stockholm that would like to connect with local corporates, right? So connecting international startups with our local corporates to create those ties, I think is strong. And conversely, could we create ties with corporations in specific tech sectors in Helsinki with startups from Montreal? So that would be one area that I'd like to develop. And that, I know that in Amsterdam, the corporate, the involvement of corporates is very strong in the startup ecosystem. That's really what we're working on as well, is to increase corporate involvement in our ecosystem. And if we can create those ties internationally, we can make it mutually stronger.
I hope that's absolutely really easy to actually facilitate. And this is the stuff we have been doing quite a lot with different places. So kind of trying to facilitate where the corporates are actually finding the kind of like innovation potential over here and vice versa. So
So Miska, you can expect an email, tomorrow morning, at least tomorrow morning, Patrick time. So also because it's being mentioned in the chat by Rosanna Clerks, it's and I think it's great to mention the Startup in Residence program. So Startup in Residence, we saw in Amsterdam happening in San Francisco. It's a program where the city of San Francisco invited startups to come up with solutions for city problems. Then we flew over, we brought it into Amsterdam, and we used the playbooks of San Francisco. Now it grew into the rest of the Netherlands, ministries, other cities. And this is an example that is now being picked up in Ukraine. So Tech Ukraine is also working in this, let's say, approach with the playbooks, with the label. And this is a specific example that, from my perspective, these are projects like Startup in Residence Europe, would be something which you start. Another example I know happening in Montreal is the Student Investment Fund, already for a longer period of time. Like students run an investment fund in order to, facilitate and fund student startups, which is not only a funding, let's say, perspective of interest, but also being a partner in an ecosystem and connecting students with, the ecosystem. That is happening in the Netherlands. In Amsterdam, we have the Student Investment Fund as well. I think there can be a, global, let's say, path of collaboration between such a project or initiative as well. And I can go on and on. So what we said in Amsterdam, it is do the ordinary extremely well. Like what we see coming from our Keystone teams is more or less the same, and you can work together. So Roseanne Clerks, thanks for mentioning this. I think is a good example. I think, Natalia, you might say one or two words about Startup in Residence, but before you do, we have a few minutes left. I also want to hear can you share one failure that we can learn when it comes to a Keystone team? Was there one mistake or a failure happening Tech Ukraine that you want to share? Just quickly, because we have a few minutes left. Natalia.
Okay, so a couple of words about Startup in Residence. We do indeed had the first batch of Startup in Residence. It went really well, and this is exactly what we need. We need to open the local market, and we need to enable launching customers from the municipalities and from ministries to adopt startups. So this is what we did, and we benefited really well from Startup in Residence Amsterdam, and we are very grateful for this openness to cooperation. And also our other initiatives like the portal and also internationalization programs are also something that we took from the best practices from the Dutch ecosystem. Speaking about the failures, I would say that our biggest failure is that we like the funding, because like we as an organization, we were expecting that the government will pick up and will support us, and this is not happening yet. So we're communicating with the donors about like selling the idea of Keystone team and of Tech Ukraine to move forward, to move further. So I believe that for us, the key learning is to make the initiative sustainable from the very start, and to ensure that we have enough understanding from the stakeholders from the very beginning that why we need to have such an entity and how that works. Because lack of this understanding is actually leading to, like, I don't know, like misunderstanding of the global picture, and global picture is something that like it's difficult to explain like right from the start.
Thanks, Natalia, for this explanation. Thanks for this, and I think it's getting the funding in, but also maintaining a startup, to experiment and validate what is working. Yeah. Patrick, you have one failure that we can learn from as a Keystone team or an influencer? Patrick.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question well.
So is there one mistake you made as a Keystone team or the lead of the Keystone team you want to share? Say, hey, don't make this mistake.
Well, of course, it's failing to mobilize the key individuals when we kick off large projects. I think that was one of the main mistakes when we kicked it off. That you absolutely need to avoid bringing the key people from support organizations, public sector, investors and also entrepreneurs and mobilizing, and it takes a lot of energy. But I find that, you know, failing that from the beginning can be a painful mistake over time. So, you know, that's something that we corrected early on, fortunately for us, and we're able to pick up from there. But mobilizing is key, so never forget
thanks,
that.
Patrick. We have 1 minute left. So Miska, just a small failure, just a small one, but that we can learn from.
Well, once actually, if you're developing ecosystem, like take one certain sector or something like that, that this development will take some time. So it's not a 2-year project; it's a 5-year project. So in 2 years, you won't get anything done, and having that kind of like understanding is something that people should actually have when setting up the expectation and thinking about the funding opportunities. So kind of like trying to make sure that there's enough kind of like funding available if you're developing something totally new, because it will take some time. I've seen it several times that the private companies have been trying to establish themselves as the creator of this and that network, and then after 2 years they are gone.
So that is, I think that is a good advice as well. Just to wrap up, so the learnings or the mistakes we made or failures might be one of that we forgot some communities. We forgot some, you know, groups of people in our city, and that grew. You know, the ecosystem was growing, but, you know, inequality was growing as well. Lack of diversity was growing. So we were on panels talking about diversity, but, you know, not always we were diverse. Also here we see actually the same challenge. Next time we should have more cultural backgrounds. This is one of the, let's say, learnings, because again, that is not happening. So that was one of the things that we learned in Amsterdam, and now pushing a lot of effort to bring equality, to have all cultural backgrounds in the ecosystem and to grow from there. Miska, thank you so much. Patrick, thank you so much. Natalia, thank you so much. And all people
Pleasure to be there.
Listening. Yeah,
Thank you.
I want to wrap up with it is, I think it's we, the ecosystem, and, you know, it should be a collaborative force of Keystone teams around the world. I see that happening. So I see that also being connected via Startup Genome, via platforms such as the Next Web Conference. So please reach out to these people, to GF, to Peter Paul van Oerle, to, you know, to us, to, you know, become a part of a bigger movement. Thanks so much, everyone, and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.